My children tried to bury me alive, pretended to cry at my funeral, but I heard everything. Maria had always been a strong woman, who bore alone the burden of raising her 3 children after her husband disappeared years ago. At 55, she still kept a strict routine, taking care of the house, working part-time at a small neighborhood store, and of course, staying present in her children's lives, even when the fights and disagreements between them intensified. Anna, the oldest daughter, was resentful and cold. Roberto, the middle child, had left home after a serious argument. And Lucas, the youngest, was in constant conflict with his mother, always accusing her of being too controlling. That morning, Maria woke up as usual, but with a strong headache, something out of the ordinary. She tried to ignore it, but when she got up to make coffee, she noticed that the left side of her body wasn't responding properly. Her arm was limp, her leg heavy, and her vision blurry. Terrified, she tried to scream for help, but her voice was failing. She knew something very serious was happening. Luckily, Anna, who lived next door, was passing by to drop off a package. Hearing the muffled cry, she ran into her mother's house. She found Maria collapsed on the floor, her face tense and hands trembling. Without wasting time, she called 911 and requested an ambulance. Fear filled the narrow hallway as Anna tried to remain calm, though anguish was clear in her eyes. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics acted quickly. Maria was placed on a stretcher, and Anna accompanied her to the hospital, her heart tight, praying for a miracle. At the emergency room, the attending physician assessed the situation. It was a hemorrhagic stroke, severe, with an imminent risk of death. Maria was admitted to the ICU, where the monitoring machines and constant beeping revealed the delicacy of her condition. The other children were called. Roberto arrived late, irritated, murmuring harsh words against their mother, blaming her for not being a better mother, accusing her of choosing work and strictness over affection. Lucas arrived shortly after, tense and withdrawn, saying little, as if avoiding looking at the mother now unconscious and connected to machines. Anna tried to hold everything together but also felt anger and unresolved hurt bubbling up during the crisis. The following days were a battle between hope and despair. Maria showed no signs of improvement. The doctors explained that the situation was critical and the chances of recovery were minimal. The family hovered between heartfelt prayers and harsh conversations, in which old wounds and resentments resurfaced. In a private conversation with the doctor, the children made it clear that if their mother didn't improve soon, they preferred not to prolong her suffering. They asked that, if it came to it, she not be resuscitated nor kept alive by machines. It was a cold and painful request, a sentence of abandonment disguised as a rational decision. Anna, even against her own feelings, agreed on behalf of the family. She felt guilty, but couldn't face everything alone. Roberto had already distanced himself, and Lucas was emotionally unreachable. They agreed not to tell anyone about the decision, as if silence could make the end less cruel. In the early hours of the morning, Maria suffered cardiac arrest. The medical team tried to resuscitate her, but in light of the children's request, stopped after a few minutes. Silence filled the room. Maria's body was declared clinically dead. The heart that had beat so many times for them had finally stopped. The children were called to identify the body. When they arrived at the hospital, they saw their mother lifeless, her face pale and expression serene, as if she had already found peace. They pretended to be sad, looked around so no one would see the indifference, or even the relief they felt. In hushed tones, they began mentally dividing the inheritance, as if Maria's death was just the beginning of a new dispute. However, inside that motionless body, the story was far from over. Maria still had strength to fight, to show that it wasn't so easy to erase someone from their own existence. And this was just the beginning of what was to come. The hospital morgue was a silent, cold, and impersonal place, a space where people came only to confirm the end of a story. That's where Maria's body was taken right after her death was declared. Wrapped in a white sheet, lying on a metal table, she truly looked dead to any ordinary eye. But something inside her was still pulsing, a faint, hidden spark, a force refusing to accept final silence. That night, while the morgue shift went about its routine, the technicians moved between rooms, checking bodies and preparing documents for the exams that would confirm the official deaths. The head of the morgue, a middle-aged man named Paolo, watched with rigid posture and tired eyes the daily routine of invisible farewells. He was the first to notice the strange movement. Maria, supposedly dead, blinked with difficulty. A slight tremor ran through her still body. Paolo froze for a moment, startled, unsure if it was fatigue or his mind playing tricks. He cautiously approached, called a colleague for help. Together, they touched Maria, checked her vital signs, and to their astonishment, they heard a faint, irregular heartbeat. The decision was immediate. Keep it a secret. The revelation could cause a scandal in the hospital, and Maria was still vulnerable, unable to speak or move properly. Paolo and his colleagues decided to pretend she was still dead, hiding the truth from her children and the medical staff. It was a risk, but the woman lying there was someone who deserved a second chance. Maria woke slowly, feeling the cold of the room and the immobility of her body that still trapped her. Pain, confusion, fear, all mixed together. But above all, there was the will to survive. The morgue workers began caring for her in secret, bringing water and small doses of food through tubes, trying to preserve the life her own family had tried to erase. In the days that followed, Maria learned to use her few movements to communicate with Paolo and his team, who, moved by her story, began to protect her. She confided that she no longer trusted her children, suspected they had never truly loved her, and if she was to live, she wanted to do something they would never forget. A plan formed clearly in her mind: to fake her own burial, witness her children's reaction, expose their true faces, and at the right moment, surprise them with a twist that would change everything. It was a chance for justice, for silent revenge. Meanwhile, back at the family home, news of Maria's death spread like a quiet wildfire. The children prepared the funeral with fake tears and rehearsed speeches. Each of them hid a private emotion. Anna, a mix of guilt and resentment. Roberto, a disguised relief. Lucas, a bottled-up anger he himself couldn't quite understand. The day of the burial arrived. The cemetery was full of relatives, friends, and neighbors, all there to say goodbye to Maria. The children took center stage, crying, hugging, and drawing the crowd's attention with what looked like genuine grief. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Maria, disguised with a veil and simple clothes, watched everything from among the tombstones, feeling every falsehood, every empty word. When the moment came to announce the contents of the will, a heavy silence fell over the crowd. The children waited anxiously to learn what their mother had left them. The surprise came when, in the middle of the service, Maria entered the chapel, pulled back her veil, and with a firm, commanding voice declared, "None of you will receive a single cent of what you think is mine. You are all disinherited." The shock was instant. Her children froze, unsure how to react. The fake tears turned into looks of fury and despair. That moment marked the beginning of a new battle, one in which Maria would finally take control of her own story. The silence that fell over the chapel after Maria's declaration felt suffocating, as if the very air had stopped circulating. Her children stared at her in disbelief, their mouths dry, their hands trembling, while the crowd began to murmur among themselves, stunned by the unexpected twist to what was supposed to be a final farewell. Anna, the eldest daughter, was the first to react. Her eyes, still glistening with false tears, now sparkled with a harsh, almost venomous glare. "Mother, you can't be serious. After everything we did for you, how can you disinherit us like this?" Her voice trembled, but there was an accusatory tone behind it, a veil of outrage masking the guilt she desperately tried to hide. Roberto, the middle child, swallowed hard, trying to maintain his composure. "This must be a cruel joke. You're confused, mother, or worse, someone's influencing you." He shot a quick glance at Lucas, silently seeking support, but his brother remained distant, his expression closed off, almost cynical. Lucas, the youngest, stepped forward with a cold, unreadable face. Enough. We don't need this anymore. You're sick, and this madness is only going to destroy us. His voice was steady, but behind it stirred a storm of repressed emotions, anger, fear, sadness, and perhaps a trace of belated regret. Maria looked at each of them, her gaze a mixture of sorrow and fierce resolve. Sick? Crazy?
No.
I'm more alive than ever. You were the ones living off me, just waiting for me to die so you could finally get what you wanted. Her voice was calm, but each word struck like a blow. She took a deep breath and continued. For years, I endured everything. I tolerated the lies, the indifference, the betrayals. You didn't love me. You used my name and my money. That's why, in my will, everything was left to charities, to people who truly need it, and to those who showed me love and respect. Her eyes shimmered with a blend of pain and triumph. The chapel now seemed too small to contain the swelling tension. The murmurs grew louder, turning into hushed whispers, and some guests began to step back, visibly uneasy with the scene unfolding before them. Maria felt the weight of loneliness, but also the strength of her decision. She was finally breaking free from the invisible chains that had bound her to a false family. Anna, defeated, began to cry, this time, truly. No more pretending. You'll regret this, Mother. You don't know what you're doing. But no one was listening anymore. Just then, Paolo, the head of the morgue who had secretly helped Maria recover, entered the chapel quietly. In his hands was a thick envelope containing signed and witnessed documents confirming Maria's new will. Ladies and gentlemen, he said in a firm voice, these are the official documents. Maria is alive, and she has chosen to deliver justice with her own hands. The shock was palpable. Some family members and close friends looked at Maria with a mix of admiration and fear. Others simply turned their backs, unable to face such a hard truth. Maria walked to the center of the chapel, lifting her head high with pride. You've learned the hard way that you can't manipulate or underestimate a mother. Her voice echoed strong and clear, as if death itself had given up on taking her. Her children, now powerless, realized the game had changed. The control they once had over her had evaporated, and the real battle was just beginning. Maria knew that despite the victory of that day, she would have to rebuild her life from the ground up, but now, she would do it on her own terms, free from false promises and toxic dependencies. The sun began to rise on the horizon, bathing the chapel in a soft light and bringing a sense of new hope. Maria, though weary, felt more alive than ever, reborn from the ashes of a past marked by betrayal and abandonment. The days that followed the fake funeral were a blend of heavy silence and small internal revolutions for Maria. Now officially alive, yet free from the weight of the family that had betrayed her, she faced her new awakening with a strength she never knew she possessed. The hospital, once the setting of her near departure, now felt like a distant place, a chapter from which she had emerged stronger. The will had surprised everyone, shaking the family's foundations and even unsettling acquaintances who had only ever seen her as a submissive woman controlled by her children. Maria returned to her home, which now felt strangely empty. Her children had vanished, each one gone in a cloud of rage and shame after the revelation. The mansion that once hosted silent disputes and intrigues was now a refuge for her reflection and, above all, her fresh start. The first challenge was loneliness. The quiet rooms seemed to echo the voices of the past, moments of abandonment and disrespect. Yet, amidst that emptiness, Maria discovered a peace she had never known, the peace of autonomy. For the first time, she could think about herself, about her forgotten dreams and old desires. With the help of the morgue workers who had kept her secret and now supported her, Maria began to reorganize her life in a different way. She rediscovered the joy of small things, tending to the garden, cooking simple meals, watching the films she had always wanted to see but had never had the time or freedom to enjoy. Maria also decided it was time to take care of herself. She scheduled medical appointments to strengthen herself physically after the stroke, but more importantly, She sought psychological help to heal the invisible wounds left by years of neglect. Slowly, she rebuilt her self-esteem, brick by brick. But the past refused to let her go. News about the will spread, and the sensationalist media turned the case into a spectacle. Maria saw her public image become the subject of heated debate. Some called her brave, others vengeful. She didn't care. She knew her fight was for justice and freedom. Her children tried to approach her again, but Maria received them with coldness. "What do you want now? To use me like before? No, that's over." They, intimidated, realized they no longer had any control over her. With the inheritance directed to charitable institutions, Maria began visiting orphanages, shelters, and nursing homes. She found a new sense of purpose in solidarity. Helping those who truly needed it became her mission, a way to turn pain into love. On one of these visits, she met Helena, a young volunteer full of energy and hope, who inspired her to think about the future. "It's never too late to start over, Maria. Life still has so much to offer you," she said with a contagious smile. With the support of Helena and the former morgue workers, Maria began planning a social project for the elderly, a welcoming space filled with activities that would bring joy and dignity to those who, like her, had once faced abandonment. This new chapter, though full of challenges, gave Maria a deep sense of fulfillment. She was writing her own story, far from the shadows of the family that had tried to erase her. The past, however painful, had given her the strength to be reborn. Maria, the woman who had once been declared dead, was now the protagonist of her own life, free, strong, and full of hope.